Good evening and welcome to raconteurs-news, going out on alternativemedia.net now. Hope you're all having a great weekend. Obviously this is what's commonly known as Remembrance Sunday. So to mark that occasion, I'm going to play a podcast from last year that we recorded with Sarah-Goodley, myself and Tom Barnes when I was doing Enemy Within together. And I think it's worth replaying. Unfortunately, Sarah's not in a position to do a live show this year, and hopefully she'll be back with us soon. But I hope you enjoy this and find it useful.
Hello and welcome to Enemy Within, going out live on Spreaker.com, Sunday the 15th of November 2015. This podcast is sponsored by GiftGaff Phones. If you want a SIM card without a contract, live in the UK, and you want a SIM card like I use, like my family uses, like my friends use, head over to enemywithinradio.com, click the GiftGaff and donate button, go over to giftgaff.com, check out the packages first, see how good it is, and then click our link. You get a £5 free credit, and it supports the show that we do here on Spreaker.com. Yes, we did delete the show that we just did. It lasted about 30 seconds and was just echoing when we were playing the first song. But our guest today is Sarah-Goodley. That's Sarah who's coughing now.
I know, sorry. I've had a frantic few minutes where I was having some Skype problems before we started. So I was having a frantic few minutes trying to get on here. And then obviously it's left me so that I haven't sort of prepared for the show as well as I probably should have done. So you'll have to bear with me while I get my shit together.
It's not a show, it's just a conversation, Sarah. That's what we always say. That's what Andy says. It's just a conversation.
Even to have a conversation, I like to have my shit together.
I mean, the amount of people who freak out on Truth Frequency. How many do that, Andy? Because we see how many people are actually listening.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm shy. You're talking to me now. It's only the same difference.
You don't really
I realise that.
You don't really see who's listening anyway, so It could be one person, it could be a million. It doesn't really matter. You're just having a conversation. If they like it, they like it. If they don't like it, that's fair enough. But
Yes, sir, I do agree, but on the same count, even when I'm having a normal conversation, I don't want to sound retarded.
you've just been getting attacked on Facebook, haven't you?
I know, yeah, not half, yeah. Yeah, it's not good to have an opinion outside or have any thoughts outside the narrative that's being peddled to us on the mainstream spoon-feeding megaliths, is it?
Well, I was listening to Newsnight last night about the Paris attacks, and they were interviewing this guy, not interview, just had the reporter on the ground, but he's getting all his lines through his ear. He's getting them through his earpiece, and he was talking to his earpiece. He's going, like, he was giving his spiel, and then he was going, yeah. And then he was saying it, I was like, this would be much more coherent if he wasn't getting his lines through his earpiece. Jeez.
Well, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I saw it in action. I was at the Bilderberg protest. I saw exactly how mainstream media operates when they've got this guy on the ground. He's got his lines already prepared on a sheet, and he walks backwards and forwards. I watched the Sky News guy just walk backwards and forwards, practicing his lines. Didn't have a clue what he was reporting about. Just read it off to the camera, and then you ask him a question about it after, and he hasn't got a clue. He doesn't even know what he just said.
Well, how were they already there? That's what I want to know.
Because they get sent there. They just get sent there.
Yeah, but how were they already there? How were they? They're there just then.
Oh,
witnessing it. How were they there?
The best one was the day before Bilderberg, because we were there the day before it actually kicked off, the protest and everything. But we didn't see this, but I was watching it on a video back at the hotel. Alex Jones was outside getting interviewed by the BBC, and they were asking him questions, and he was answering the questions, fair enough. And then they ran out of questions, and she was so robotic, she just kept nodding. She was just like, she ran out of questions, just nodding. She's just nodding, and he's like, he's just walking around and going, "Are you finished? Are you finished?" And she's like, yeah. She didn't have a clue.
It's mad, isn't it? It's absolutely crackers. And I think we're mad. I've been accused of being mad so many times this weekend. Yeah, I might be. I very well might be. But anyway, we'll have a look at that, because this is my online therapy session with you guys. All right, this week. So
pressure.
This could be absolutely fantastic, or it could be absolutely shite. I'm not sure which it's going to be. But usually, when I'm feeling like this and I've got a lot to get out, it can be a bit of a butterfly thing going on, but it's often pure gold. So we'll see what happens.
I can't believe that you've just found out about Operation Gladio.
I know, yeah. How did that pass me by? But, I mean, the whole sort of false flag thing isn't my expertise, isn't it? I've had my head up my backside with the epigenetics and the perinatal period of childcare and childbirth, etc. So I suppose it's not my area of expertise. But nevertheless, it's something we've got to keep interested in and keep researching, isn't it? But
it's certainly something that you keep in mind, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, we're going to get to the Paris attacks that have just happened. And I'll state my point and my position is that it's too early. Either side, that the official story is not even out itself. So I've looked at all this conspiracy stuff that comes out every time there's an event, and I think it's the flakiest stuff that I've ever seen from an event for me. It's got no substance, nothing provable, nothing solid. It's just, I think it's on a whim, to be honest. I think it comes out every time. But obviously,
the thing that's coming out is that there's massive amounts of psychops on that side to make us all look like idiots as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
I mean,
but obviously, if there is something, it needs to come out. So I don't mind stuff coming out. I don't argue against people putting that out. I don't think it's wrong to do it. But I'm saying now there's nothing of substance that I've seen that's provable. But obviously, when you've got operations like Operation Gladio, you've got to keep those things in mind. People are pushing the buttons. ISIS was created by the West. We know that. That's solid. That's admitted. Saudi Arabia funds it. Where do you think they got the Toyota trucks from? That's solid. We're friends with Saudi Arabia. They're the same religion. It's Wahhabism. It's not Islam. It's this flavour of Islam. It's Wahhabism. They're doing exactly the same things in Saudi Arabia, beheading people and crucifixions, and it's the same religion, same flavour of religion anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not again, we've got to look back, and this is what we were saying before the show started. We've got to look back. And really, this show for me, because I think anybody that's involved with this sort of research, what it's all about fundamentally is the exploration of self. And part of the exploration of self is looking into your family, your history. And so I suppose for me, this whole night tonight is about my three fathers. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people do know who may be listening that I had a quite unusual upbringing and that I was brought up by my grandparents. My grandparents adopted me. But I also spent a lot of time with my birth mother, who was brought up with my sister and her husband. But I spent very little time with my natural father. When I did make a joke that it was a good job that I worked for myself, because they all died in a fairly short space of time. I did make a joke that at the time it was a good job that they worked for themselves. I worked for myself, because if I was having to have time off to visit my third dad's funeral, they might think I was a right lying cow. But anyway, so I suppose that this is a tale of those three people in a way, and an exploration of those three people, and in a way it all ties in with all of this and all what's going on. But I don't know whether we'll get there all tonight, but I think it's important to try. And I suppose the first one I'd like to talk about is the dad that I thought of as my dad and was brought up as my dad, and that was my grandfather. Now, again, I've had a lot of run-ins over the past sort of couple of weeks over the poppy situation, as I do every time of year, and this time of year every year, and the whole Samhain and Halloween, and which, when you look at it, you know, the Samhain was a remembrance of our ancestors. It was an absolute remembrance of our ancestors. And so I suppose it's poignant that I'm thinking of these three departed men that were so important in my life in one way or another. And that the whole sort of Armistice Day, Poppy Day, whatever you want to call it, has been very much hijacked by the warmongers. It's been very much hijacked by the people, inciting people to join the dead. It's not about remembering the dead, it's inciting people to join them.
Yeah, just before you go on, the last veteran of the First World War says exactly the same thing.
Yes, exactly.
Harry Patch.
And I'd just like to comment, so before you carry on, that I listened to your show on critical mass last year at this time, and it was incredible. If it's still out there, I urge people to hunt it down, because it was a difficult show for you to get through, but we were in floods of tears. Yeah,
and it is, but I find it coming up this time of year every year, and I've got that piece again. I have got that piece to read out if you want to hear it, and you've got time, because I think when you hear it being read, because we don't hear a lot of Matthew Deleuze, but that piece that he wrote called "Swinging on the Gates of Hades," Remembrance Day Exposed, back in November 2007, is such an important piece, and we don't hear enough about it. And it's very much sort of put to the back burner, if you like.
Who was he?
Matthew Deleuze.
Mm-hmm.
He's still about. He's an amazing guy, and he wrote Breaking the Serpent's Spell. He's a really good author. It'd be fantastic if you could get him on, but he doesn't do Skype, so it would be.
There's a lot of people who are afraid of Skype.
But he will come on the phone. So if you can get him on, it would be an amazing person to get on. A bit like Barry Trevor, he doesn't do Skype either, does he? But
yeah, on Tuesday.
I know, that's exciting, isn't it? That's brilliant.
Yeah, I've got my mobile phone rigged up to the mixer now, so all we need to do is do the final tests on that, and I believe you're going to be joining us for that one, aren't you, Sarah?
Yeah, that'll be an exciting one. I'm having to forgo my belly dance night, but it's an important one. It's an absolutely important one to do, so I'm looking forward to that one. But yeah, so again, we're looking. You've got to look back. We have to look back, and we have to remember those that have gone before us. And I started again falling out with some people fairly close to me over this issue the last week or so, over the Armistice Day or Poppy Day or Remembrance Day, whatever you want to call it. But what I did as a result of that was start really looking back, because I remembered some things from history about the First World War. Now, my father was born in 1918, just before the end of the First World War. And he was somebody that served, because he was 21 at the outbreak of the Second World War. So he served right from before the war started to 6 months after the war finished. And he went through the whole of the Second World War. Now, that man only once came with me. I was in the Brownies, and he came with me to a Remembrance Day service. And it really affected him quite badly. I remember it really affecting him, and he was very insistent that there was no glory in war. There's nothing glorious about being dead. And he was a very gentleman, but he was very bitter about what had happened during that period of time. And it did leave him with a lifelong authority. And he would just deal with authority in a way to make them leave him alone, and that was it. He didn't respect authority at all. And he was quite quirky in the way that he could get around things in a non-confrontational way.
Those are the best people that you meet in life, who don't like authority.
Yeah, he was a very special man. He was never confrontational. I wish I could be a bit more like him. Because I seem to be quite a confrontational character, but he never was. And he would just let it go, if you know what I mean. But I do remember very distinctly, he didn't wear a poppy. He stood there with me because I was only quite young, and he stood there with me. But he struggled with it. He struggled with it immensely. And of course, at that age, I would have been less than 10, and I didn't understand it. But it did stay with me. And he never attended another service, as far as I remember. He never wore a poppy. He very much sort of stepped aside from it. Never said anything about it, but very much stepped aside from it. And then I've started looking at the actual causes of World War One. Have you ever looked into the actual causes of World War One, how it all started?
Yep.
Now...
Yeah. But Sarah, just one thing that I can't remember whether it was your show that prompted me to the realisation, or it happened just slightly before your show last year, but it only occurred to me last year how much a poppy pinned to your chest looks like a bullet hole surrounded by blood. Yeah. And I don't think that is any accident.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you there.
Well, that is the point of a poppy, isn't it? That's what it's supposed to represent.
Yeah.
Right.
And what I say, we look at what's happening now. We look at what happened over the weekend, and then we take that back to what happened in Serbia when the Austrian Archduke Ferdinand, Franz Ferdinand, was shot. Him and his wife were shot that time, which was a kick-off for all of the World War One. Mm-hmm. Now, and then we start looking about that band of young men who instigated that assassination. And they were all less than 19, and they were all supposed to be radicalised. That's if it happened at all, because several of them failed, and there was the one, wasn't there, who thought he'd failed. There was one that fell off the bridge and fell in the river, and then there was the other one who thought he'd failed. Now, they get the Archduke Ferdinand and his wife to safety after this failed assassination attempt, and then inexplicably send them back out on the street to go and visit the casualties of the bomb explosion that had failed to get them in hospital, where, coincidentally, this young man, less than 19 years old, was supposed to have been sitting, drowning his sorrows, having a cup of tea and a snack after failing to assassinate the Archduke Ferdinand. And then their motorcade comes by on the way to the hospital. Now, there's lots comes up for me with that. There's the whole John F. Kennedy thing. There was everything that happened yesterday comes up for me. There was, or on Friday comes up for me looking at that. When you look, again, it's pretty obvious that we were dealing with patsies. Again, there. It was when you look into the amount of coincidences, and I beg people, I haven't got sort of time to go into it in a massive amount tonight, but, look into the revisionist history of World War One and see how many coincidences there were, how many times that it could have been prevented. And even a couple of years into World War One, we were beaten. We were beaten after 2 years of fighting in World War One. The British were beaten, absolutely beaten. And then you look at how the bankers got the Americans into the World War One by sinking the Lusitania. The sinking of the Lusitania was obviously a massive, another false flag event that is absolutely proved. 100%.
Well, they had a massive propaganda campaign in America. Basically, the same thing that they did with Saddam, saying that he was throwing babies out of incubators. They were saying that the Kaiser was chopping arms off and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. Because the Americans had no interest in joining the war at all.
Absolutely. And so I'd implore anybody to say, not just say, listen to what we say, but go and look into that themselves. And of course, it was everything that happened in World War One that set up everything to happen in World War Two.
The assassins, by the way, were armed by the group called the Black Hand, which Alex Jones goes into in the documentary Terror Storm. And he talks about the links they had to British intelligence, the Black Hand group. But I've never looked into those links myself. But certainly something for people to look into. Yeah,
it would be another interesting aspect, and it's not my area of expertise, so I don't want to go down that way. But in a way, I wanted to pay homage to this sort of first father of mine, my grandfather, who adopted me and brought me up as his own, and just to go some way to appreciating the difficulties that he must have gone through in where everything... I mean, I was only born 20 years after the war, and I remember it was so fresh in their minds. Everyone is still very, very traumatised by it. Very traumatised. A bit the same as we're, the whole world now is still traumatised by the 9/11 and I suppose, and everything that's gone on since. But again, when you see how many times we had chance to not be going down this route, and these are absolutely bankers' wars. Absolutely bankers' wars.
Well, they fund both sides.
Yes, exactly. Well,
when I was very small, Sarah, I remember being at my grandma's house, and I don't know, it was some film I'd seen or some war game I was playing with my cousin, but I said the word Nazi, and my grandma made me leave the house. She said, "You do not ever say that word in my house."
Wow.
Yeah.
Which shows the level of trauma that people were suffering. Interesting remark there from Fritz in the chat room saying World War One was about the creation of Israel.
Yes. Well, it was creating the right conditions for World War Two, where the creation of Israel. And then have you both looked into Churchill, who was funding Churchill in his last years?
No.
That's quite interesting. From 1936 onwards, he was being funded by a Jewish organisation, and he wasn't interested at all in Germany before then. It wasn't in his rhetoric, but he was only on once he resigned from, I think it was Stanley Baldwin's government. He was just on a very, very minimal wage of about £500 a year, and for maintaining the staff, and because he was maintaining a big country house with nannies and gardeners and cooks and this and that and the other, and of course they funded him throughout between from 1936 onwards. They funded him because he owed them, of course. Then, and again, when you look at it. America only came in, and it was the whole thing. We did it in the First World War. We'll do it again. We're the only organisation that we can get America on board, and we did it last time. We can do it again, and of course, then Pearl Harbor happened,
which is on the History Channel now as a false flag.
Yeah.
I've read numerous books actually about completely different things, but they touch on Pearl Harbor, and they knew through a double agent called Popov that the attack on Pearl Harbor was coming, because, believe it or not, the intelligence of Pearl Harbor came from the Germans, and it was supplied to the Japanese, which this double agent told the Americans when he was in America 3 months before. And they knew for certain through radio communications 3 days before that it was going to happen.
Yeah. And so here we go again and again and again. And we've got to look back. And I know that everyone everyone has been torn apart by everything that happened over the weekend. But we have to look back to see what's happened, and then we have to look with fresh eyes at what's happening now. And it's so important for people to do that.
Well, I think with the situation that we have now, ISIS is a real threat. And I compared it to, there was a situation in the First World War where the Russians and the Germans had a ceasefire because wolves were killing both sides. So they had a ceasefire just to kill the wolves. And I compared it to that. I said, ISIS are the wolves now, and the people who are having a barney are us and Russia. Because you'd think we'd team up with Russia now, just the same as we did against the Nazis, to fight ISIS. But no, Russia's the bad guy. We can't team up with them now. But we've never been friends with Russia. We were never friends beforehand. Before the Second World War, we were never friends with Russia.
Well, we probably were.
Or the Soviet Union.
I was going to say, we probably were when everything was being run by Queen Victoria's grandchildren, weren't we? Mm-hmm. On the surface, we probably weren't, but behind closed doors, we were. Mm-hmm. So it's all been a big facade anyway, hasn't it?
Well, it is. That's why it comes out with the Nazi links with the royal family.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I'd like to do is read again, and I think it's important because I did do this last year, but I do think it's so important that I'm going to read this again. I'm going to read Swinging on the Gates of Hades, Remembrance Day Exposed by Matthew Deleuze, and I would love to interview him at some stage. I did try, but at the time he wouldn't come on Skype, so it was a bit impossible, but we'll have to have a look about getting him on because he does do some amazing research. So it starts with, I will walk any desert to find my rain, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail me. Matthew Deleuze, 10th of November, 2007. My research in guided direction is taking me to places I don't really want to go. That said, I realise that to escape the prison that you and I are in, I simply have to go there. It was not easy for me to write my last article about the real reasons behind May Day and Labour Day festivals. For those who have followed me up to now, I will say to you, it's time to go deeper. We cannot stay on a level of understanding that stops with ancient Egyptian symbolism popping up at seaside resorts in Ferris wheels, or symbolic monuments or logos, etc. Things like that should now be far easier for you to see more clearly, and indeed those things should also be far easier for you to accept than they were back in 2004. And if so, I am very glad. I really do hope that the information has sunk in for a few of you. If you can now accept that the symbolism all around you is and has been used as hypnotic triggers to keep you in a trance-like state, then you're ready to move on to a more difficult level of understanding about how the serpent controls us all. My last article about the trade unions and the May Day, Labour Day was a tester point for you. So if you understood it, then please follow me in this article. If you did not understand the union article or it confused you, then I suggest you reread some of my earlier articles again and take it from there. There's no rush, simply take the articles in, or leave them for a rainy day, or even laugh at them and never return to them if that's the way you feel about them. I won't be offended. For those that are new to these articles, I suggest you go back to my article Beside the Seaside and start reading from there. Anyway, my little band of truth seekers, I need to explain Remembrance Day, which is also known as Poppy Day, Armistice Day and Veterans Day to you. This ritual that we blindly all take for granted usually takes place in the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month and basically consists of everyone stopping what they are doing at 11 a.m. on the 11th of November and staying silent for 2 minutes. Then on the nearest Sunday to the 11th, a far bigger ritual takes place in some countries, and in all the world, leaders hold ceremonies in public places all around the globe. This is known as Remembrance Sunday in the UK. Some countries only have the 11th of November as an official holiday, and in 2007, the 11th of November falls on a Sunday, always making it an extra special day. The official reason given for that is that the World War I ended on the 11th of November 1918. There is some information about the history of Remembrance Day and information about the Sunday ritual respectively below. You must realise that all generations of human beings in the world today are programmed to respect, buy and display poppies every November. We automatically do it, don't we? Silly buggers we are, and we just buy a flower out of respect for all the brave men and women who died for us, don't we? It's hard to pass a poppy seller in the street, isn't it? It's just one of those things we do, isn't it? We basically respect the dead. Let me make it perfectly clear before we go any further that I am not disrespecting any brave soldier who died fighting in what they thought was a good cause and to protect their fellow countrymen and women. I need to make that clear. I am only trying to expose the deceptive forces that I believe covertly rule this world. If I can help do that, then no man or woman need needlessly die in a war ever again. So let's get into it, eh? I'll briefly mention the basic numerology involved. We all stop for 2 minutes, death silence, at 11 times 11 times 11, which is a symbolic 33. Ask yourself, what do you do on Poppy Day? Do you join in the 2-minute silence? Do you even wear a poppy? Do you watch the ritual live on TV? And do you buy poppies for your kids? Do you shove coins in the respective vessel charity tin and wear your poppy with pride? If you do any of the above, now is the time for you to ask yourself why. I know you believe you do it for good reasons, but do you really know you do it for good reasons? You don't really. You don't really know what you're doing, to be honest. You just do it because you've been told it's the right thing to do, and maybe you just do it out of routine, just like you follow the traditions of Christmas. Is it the right thing to do? And we all enjoy doing what we believe is the right thing to do. Yes, you are showing disrespect if you don't wear a poppy, aren't you? There is also no spiritual harm in donating money to the charities, is there? I have written about charities and their figureheads in my book, It Is For Me a Moment Breaking the Serpent's Spell. And I strongly suggest that you read a copy if you want to fully understand what I'm trying to say in this article. Anyway, let's have a look at what goes on in the official remembrance ritual, shall we? I totally believe they are doing the opposite of what you think they are. And let's look at London as a prime example. All you Brits should know that our Remembrance Sunday ritual takes place at the Cenotaph Monument near Downing Street in Whitehall, London. This scenario is similar to the events that take place all over the world, at all the major monuments and major cities, for example, the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Most small towns and cities also have a memorial to honour the dead. They do so on either the 11th of November or the second Sunday in November, and sometimes both. Small towns often use an obelisk if they have no cenotaph. Even little shitty towns like Burnley and Lancashire usually have a cenotaph, but an obelisk is just as symbolic. Indeed, massive rituals take place simply because the public believe they're honouring the brave men and women that fought and died for their freedom. On a 5 sense level, that is exactly how things look. But are we really honouring these people on Remembrance, Armistice, Veterans Day, or are we being duped on a massive scale to honouring something completely different? Although most of you blindly buy a poppy or watch the event that takes place at monuments like the Cenotaph, you will have no idea what the poppy or monuments represent. This is because your programmed mind never gets past the hypnotism to buy and respect Poppy Day. You automatically go along with it. I asked 7 people yesterday, what does Cenotaph actually mean? What it was, or even just what the word cenotaph actually meant. Not one of them knew the answer. This is what I heard as a response. Oh, it's a statue where they play trumpets at Christmas, isn't it? Is it a dinosaur? Was another one. Is it one of those poles Roman soldiers carry? Indeed, a bloke in the supermarket thought it was some kind of sticky tape. I wish I was bloody joking, but I'm assure you that I'm not. Here's what the word cenotaph really means. A cenotaph is a tomb or a monument erected in honour of a person or group of persons whose remains are elsewhere. It can also be the initial tomb for a person who has since been interred elsewhere. The word derives from the Greek kenos, one, meaning being empty, and taphos, tomb. The cenotaph is simply an empty tomb. Have you got that? Remembrance, Veteran, Armistice Days really are massive events. Here is just a brief report that mentions just a few figures for your information. So you can see the articles about the London Eye. It's also lit up red to represent the giant poppy. There is also a large amount of trivial symbolism going on around the cenotaph that I could tell you about, including what the stone is made out of. Unfortunately, This information may titillate you for a short while and maybe feed a snack to a form of moronic gossip that float around the conspiracy forums like flies spreading shit. But I'm not going to do that in this article. Those days are gone, my friends. And if you want to move on, if you really want to break free, then you must go deeper. There are quite a few people on the net now that will gladly feed some people's addiction to the low-key information and will willingly sell you a DVD that's full of shite, but I'm not one of them. So I suggest if you have any unshakable beliefs, then do not go any further in this article and stop reading now and go and buy a poppy and salute the Queen or your phony corrupt president over this coming weekend. My information is no good for you. If you're set in your beliefs and just want to hear a fairy tale story of escapism for free, of course, I'm afraid if you cannot even grasp the idea that you have been programmed to join in the rituals that don't mean what you have been told, then there is no point in going any further with me. For those like me who have an incredible ache in their soul, want for a better word, and want to break free, please read on. Firstly, let me tell you, I too have worn poppies and have made my children do the same thing. I'm not coming from an angle where I am all-knowing and I'm the same as you. I completely understand the ideology of Poppy Days, and I'm not trying to stop or persuade anyone from joining in Poppy Days if that's what you want to do or feel you should do. Right, let's have a look at the poppy first, should we? That adorable little red flower we proudly pin and display on ourselves every November. The use of the poppy dates back to ancient times, despite the fact that the establishment will tell you different and may suggest that Poppy Day only stems from the Napoleonic Wars or maybe Flanders Fields in World War I. I will tell you, and I want to tell you to take it in, that the poppy is what the poppy is related to, like in the most serpents cult, deceptive activity, ancient deities of worship. In this case, it's the son of God known in the Greek as Hypnos, and his name is Morpheus. Now we are starting to get somewhere. Morpheus has two brothers, Probeta and Phantasos, and they are known collectively as the Wani Ovli. That's O-N-E-I-O-I. Sorry, O-I. I realise that someday these names may match up with a blockbuster movie called The Matrix, but I'm not here to tell you that the word Neo is an anagram of the word one. I respect your intelligence too much and leave those things to the phony fakers selling you the DVDs. Typical forum gossips are after hearing the gripping news. Well, I go to the bottom of my stairs. Does the word Neo really change into the world one? You'll be telling me Clark Kent is really Superman next. But I will tell you that Morpheus is the god of dreams, and his father Hypnos was the god of sleep. The poppy is associated with putting people to sleep, and it symbolises just that. Obviously, there is no hiding the fact that the poppy is definitely related to Morpheus. Who could ever forget the scene from The Wizard of Oz where they put to sleep in the field of poppies? And that happens just before they actually get to the Emerald City, of course. The brainless, the heartless, and the cowardly all broke the spell of the poppy. So I'm sure I have left you in no doubt that the poppy is really symbolic of the ancient gods that represent hypnos, sleep, and dreams. Hypnosis, sleep, and dreams. Again, we are not just talking putting a few bob in a collection tins here. We're talking serious symbolic gods and serious occult symbolism. It's time to wake up. Let's move on, eh? Symbolically, the Wanneroli were supposed to have lived in the cave near the gates of Hades. If you have clicked on the word Hades, you will know that Hades stands for the god of the dead and also for the underworld, or the lower fourth dimensions, if you like. Are things starting to click yet, or are you under the spell of Morpheus and his father? Could it be possible that millions of members of the human race, especially those located in powerful countries in the world, are being conned into taking part in an occult ritual disguised as an act of respect to our brave soldiers? This is the area I wish to take you. Who would carry on such a wicked deception? Are we all so stupid that we cannot see beyond the deception? Is it possible that we have been conned into wearing poppies in some sort of sick ritual of worship of Hades, through worshipping or showing respect to Morpheus and Wanneroli? I say yes, we have been deceived into doing such a thing. And it's oh so easy to get dumbed down sheeple to do these things year after year, and I was one of them. Are your unshakable beliefs and the hypnosis you're under, do they prevent you from actually listening to such claims, or are your chakras reacting inside you? Do you not believe that we could fall for such a scam? I tell you the truth when I say that we are all duped on Remembrance Day type rituals, and we are unknowingly conned into worshipping ancient deities. And these deities are agents for the deceptive race of entities that are alien to this world. And I call these entities, their agents, the serpent cult. When we buy a poppy and take part in such ceremonies, we are not respecting our brave soldiers. Oh no, my dear brothers and sisters, we are worshipping the serpent through its agents. It's a contract that is very deceptive, and it's very painful to accept, I know, and I will have to be blunt to get you through it. The serpent cult agents in the establishment have never given a fucking shit about our brave servicemen and women. They have no respect for them whatsoever, and never have had. Indeed, the agents for the serpent created all the wars that our soldiers died in. After the wars, the serpent cult used the circumstances of the dreadful situations to create symbolic monuments and then get us to agree to them and join in with ceremonies carried out at them. The main aim of the serpent cult agents is to operate in our establishments, is not only to create war and death, but also to get you and I to worship the forces that actually create war and death. It's simply a vicious rebirth type cycle in which you feed and unknowingly worship entities which are actually creating your misery in the first place. Think for 1 minute and try to understand that carrying out Remembrance Day rituals is in fact an act of worship that is really directed towards deities, not dead soldiers. Wearing a poppy is also just like saying, I worship Morpheus. It's really just like a Christian wearing an I love Jesus badge. There is absolutely no difference. We are showing that we worship Morpheus, therefore Hades, by holding rituals around empty tombs. Please listen, please listen. Empty tombs and poppies represent Morpheus, not cannon fodder soldiers. When you take poppies as offerings to tombs and obelisks, you are worshipping, not grieving. The serpent cult has to continuously get our permission for us to rule over us. I go into many reasons why and how this happens in my books, and it's for me. Is it me for a moment? And I assure you, I am not trying to sell it to you. As I said earlier in this article, if you are set in your ways and don't read this stuff, you're wasting your time. So please go and buy 100 poppies and worship Hades instead. I'm only here for certain people, and they know inside themselves who they are. My books are useless to those that feel nothing about this information anyway. Again, the serpent cult demanded our spiritual surrender throughout the year, with Christmas being the biggest act of our spiritual surrender. It's so hard for you to accept that we spiritually give our souls away in rituals. It's so hard for you to accept that you have been hypnotized to take part in such rituals that you see as being the right thing to do. You have been led and programmed to take part in such rituals, and you are unaware of what you are really doing. If you have read my other stuff over the past years, you will know that I believe our spiritual energy is being sucked out of us during these rituals. Not only that, but we actually give the serpent cult permission to rule all aspects of our lives, lifetime after lifetime. Poppy days are the only one way of doing such things. The force behind such scams don't feel things in an emotional way like you and I do. It's simply one big joke to them to see you duped in such ways that you will attack anyone who tries to point out how you are being duped. Just like Christmas, these types of rituals have an inbuilt defence system in place in which the messenger is stoned by the mob for mentioning such things. There is nobody in this world that has more admiration or other emotional feelings for any brave soldiers that died to protect loved ones than me. It is these emotions that have assisted me to write such an article. It is entirely up to you if you take any notice of me. So I happily tell you, I believe that by taking part in Remembrance Day ceremonies, we are only ensuring death and destruction will carry on, and we are surrendering our spirits to the keepers of the gates of Hades. And I'm sorry to say, By doing so, you are ensuring that you will come back into this world and play the role of the slave to the serpent again and again. It is time to awaken from this trickery of Hypnos and the dreams of Morpheus. I hope I have got you through it. Please take some time to do your own research, especially about Hades. And please feed and heal yourselves. I will tell you that my words are true and trustworthy, and the acts of remembrance ceremonies are really only a worship and acceptance of Hades. I would like to show you another example of how spiritual energy is extracted from the masses by getting them to respect their monument, just like we respect the cenotaph. I have said before, and if we are conned into worshipping or respecting a monument as an idol, then we also unknowingly worship the origins and the creators of that said idol. It's like, I'd like to take you to Moscow, Russia for a short period. I'd like to mention a stone that was placed in Lubyanka Square, near Red Square, the home of the KGB quarters. The stone was taken from the Slavic prison camp. It was located in Slovisky, I think it is, Islands. The stone was officially placed in the remembrance of victims that died in Slovisky prison camp at the hands of the Gulag. It's not until you look into the background of such monuments that you can see what was really going on. The Slovisky stone is basically just a simple rock, and I can see that the Russian people will use the symbol placed to grieve in a similar way as we do the cenotaph of other monuments. Of course, on a 5 cents level, there is nothing wrong with that as having a place to grieve. Indeed, the Lubyanka Square is also used for many marches that occur in Moscow. Indeed, in my article on the trade unions in May Day, it will show you that Moscow is now full of Illuminati monuments, and that that is what attracted me to the relatively tame-looking stone that was placed in the Lubyanka Square. The story gets interesting when you realise that the history surrounding the stone, and I'm going to mention it to you in the hope that it will fortify the information regarding the real reasons behind Remembrance Day scam that I've tried to expose to you by mentioning the cenotaph, poppies, Morpheus and the gates of Hades. Let me first tell you that the Slovakia stone is a symbolic for the death and suffering of the victims in the labour camps. And if the history of the Slavic Islands only date back from the early 1900s, then the stone would obviously only represent what it's supposed to represent, the deaths of those in the Slovakia prisons. But it doesn't. And the history of the island, and therefore the stone, go back much, much further than this. The islands have attracted people from the mainland from time immemorial, and the first settlers came from the White Sea in 10.5 thousand years ago from the east and built their villages in the lower reaches of the River Kem. The numerous relics of the ancient Babylonian civilizations, mainly in the spiral-shaped labyrinths made of stone, have been well preserved on the island. According to the psychologist Vladimir Bruvov, the labyrinths are the images of snakes guarding the entrances of the gates to another world. This version explains why there were no permanent settlements of the island for a very long time. Our distant ancestors perceived Slovakia as a border with the whole of the other world, and they visited the island to perform rituals of communication with superior forces. It's hard to get any information from inside Russia, but this information made perfect sense to me. Indeed, it's the exact same information regarding the cenotaph in London, that is basically a stone that has been placed in the middle of a city and people treat it like a place to honour the dead. In the case of the stone in Moscow, the public are duped into using the stone that originally represents, through its snake-like stone labyrinth, a border with or a gate to other worlds. This surely is on par with the cenotaph stone, representing the gates of Hades through Morpheus, because they also protect gates into another world. Can you start to see again that the monuments placed in certain areas can have a history we know nothing about? Can you see that the real reasons for having such monuments may not compare with the establishment's explanations for having them? It certainly makes more sense to the Slovakia stone in Moscow is indeed really symbolic idol representing gates to other worlds, and the stone is far more likely connected to the occult than simply being a memorial stone. It also makes more sense to me, knowing how sick and corrupt the British establishment really is, that the cenotaph really is really symbolism that represents Morpheus and the gates of Hades, the underworld, than a memorial stone. What do you think now I have provided you with the information in this article? Is it all coincidence? All a delusion of the sick mind? Can you grasp the idea that we are all under the hypnosis and blindly carry out rituals that allow the force of alien entities to enslave us? Is our spiritual energy being taken from us when we wear the poppies and stay dead for 2 minutes, silence during remembrance service? Indeed, have these rituals stopped any wars or reduced any amount of death because of the said wars? You know and I know that they haven't. And if things carry on as they sorry, I'll start that again because this is important, but you know and I know that they haven't. And if things carry on as they are, they never fucking will. They never fucking will. We are all being suckered, and we are all being suckered all of the time. Is it my paranoia that has gone out of control and is making me say things, or can you really sense that you are indeed hypnotized? Is it just one small part of you screaming out that you want to be free and break the serpent's spell that I believe you are under? In my opinion, it's time for you to smash open the gates of Hades and free yourself. The only remembrance service you need is the one that will help you remember who the hell you really are, and not one where you adorn Morpheus with poppies. Unless we can break the spell and swing on the gates of Hades, you can never leave this world. Thank you for reading my article. May love reign over you all. And that was Matthew Deleuze on the 10th of November 2007. And he said, P.S. If you don't think the collective consciousness of the human race, or individual consciousness for that matter, has been programmed to associate Hades with death, then ask yourself what the hell all the age propaganda and fear spreading has been about for the past 20 or 30 years. Is it stuck in your mind? Lest we forget. What the masses think they get, they get. Hades is death. In your dreams, Morpheus. So I want to thank Matthew Deleuze for that article, which has been very, very important to me. And I would like to dedicate that to my late father, stroke grandfather, Jeffrey Baxter.
Wow. Need a breather after that.
Yeah. I'll just grab a drink because obviously, sorry that obviously my blooming dyslexia gets me sometimes when I'm reading out loud, and so
you're right. I'm
gonna miss words and things.
I'm gonna play a tune because I'm a breather.
Cheers, baby.
Press your mute button.
Yeah, we'll do.
See you soon, folks. Welcome back, Sarah.
Welcome. Sorry, that was a bit of a long one. I could see you were twitching there a bit.
I was reading through it, actually. I was like, where's she at?
Damn, you know all the mistakes I made then.
Nah, it wasn't that bad. But the symbology, people on the surface still go, no. And then you find out about Bohemian Grove. And you go, hang on a minute, it doesn't matter if it's real or not, this is what they believe.
Yeah, and it was actually finding out about Bohemian Grove, which made me, because until I saw about that, I'd sort of been the eternal student, if you like, always thinking that if I just did a bit more, people would listen to me. And if I just learnt a bit more, if I just went on another course, people would listen to me. And then I saw that and I went, fuck, no one's going to listen to me because the top down is creating care. Whatever you say about it, we have got a glass ceiling. It doesn't matter how much good is coming up from the grassroots level when you've got a force pushing down on you that is cremating care.
Well, it was a sacrifice of a real child originally.
Yeah, I know.
When I post those pictures of the original sacrifice of care, the cremation of care, people can't comprehend it. They don't understand what it is. And they go, this is where the elites go. And they still can't comprehend it if they're not people from the field or have looked at the information in the field. It's just so unbelievable, but it's true. I remember when it, you know, those old documentaries that used to be on TV, mostly hit pieces. Well, there was one years ago. That was the first time I actually saw Alex Jones. And when my friend later said years later, he says, "Oh, have you heard of Alex Jones?" And I said, "Is he him who shouts at building?" Because that's all you saw. He was shouting at this building that was like an owl. It was a representation of an owl, and he was shouting at it. But they were showing, like, they went up there with one guy who was with Alex Jones, and he was saying, "Oh, this is Bohemian Grove, this is where George Bush has been." And it seemed so far-fetched. It seemed like, oh, that's just bullshit they've made up. That's a mock-up photograph. The way that it represented it was ridiculous. It was only years later that I go, hang on a minute, that shit's real. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, I don't know how much is part of the whole psychological operations, because the one thing that he alerts you to such a lot, but I don't know what you think, but I certainly think that it's good even if people are sort of giving us false information. 80% of the information that they give us has got to be right for us to get it in the first place. So as long as we keep our own discernment, then I think, and double check and back check and keep sort of researching and keep backing up what we think, or even deciding that what we originally thought was not right anymore. I think it's just really important to do that with all of these characters.
Well, it's really easy to go too far, though. That's where people go down the rabbit hole and create things that don't exist. The things that do exist are ridiculous anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bohemian Grove exists. The Bilderberg exists.
Yeah.
They denied even the Bilderberg existed for decades.
Yeah. And anyway, that whole thing with the sort of going down into the child abuse brings me on to my next father. And he was a brilliant man. He was a very flawed man. And the reason why he was very flawed, he had a major drink problem. But he had been abused from the age of 4 by his stepfather. Really nasty, horrible abuse. And his mother never knew about it, never ever knew about it. She was working and what have you, so it always happened when she wasn't about. But one of the worst things that he couldn't cope with was listening to his disabled brother being abused in the attic. He was kept in the attic and he was being abused, and it was that he couldn't cope with more than ever. And he stood it for 10 years from the age of 4 until he was 14 and quite big. And he then said that if it happened anymore, then he was going to tell his mum, and he stood up to him and it never happened to him again. And I think not long after that, his younger brother was put in a home because he was getting more and more difficult to manage for his mum and stuff. So he got away from that abuse. I don't know if any further abuse happened to him. But this man was an amazing man, and he achieved quite a lot in his life, but he was always, he shook. He had to drink every day, and he shook uncontrollably. He was an amazing painter and decorator. No one knew anyone who could shake so much, could paint such a straight line. It was quite amazing. But what I want to say about that man was that he broke the cycle. He could have so easily carried on the cycle of abuse. He could have so easily abused me, abused my brother, abused my sister, and carried that on. But he didn't. He absolutely didn't. And was vehemently against any form of abuse all of his life. And he always said that one day he would say what would happen before he died. He always said that. He never did tell us, but he always said he'd tell us what had happened to him before he died. And 2 weeks before he died, he told us what happened. So that's the second man that I want to thank. And I want to thank him, excuse me for getting upset, but I want to thank him for breaking the cycle. And there's so many people out there that have been really badly abused. I know there are lots of them personally, and so many of them have done that in breaking the cycle. They're trying to get justice. I know you interviewed Mickey Summers the other day. Unfortunately, I missed that interview. And again, my stepfather, if you like, or brother-in-law, I've worked with him a lot of years. He was always fantastic to me, always very level. And he was a hell of a man that broke the cycle. And I want to thank all of those similar people out there. I mean, we've had Brian Clare on, we've had so many on, haven't we, that have done exactly that, and they've broken the cycle of abuse.
Yeah, I'm going to mention Brian. It's horrifying, Brian's story. He's so brave to tell it on shows like we have. And it's the same as what I was saying earlier. It's so hard for people to contemplate that would actually happen to somebody. But it did. It's real.
Yeah. It's real. And sorry, go on, Andy.
Sorry, my parents came to visit a few weeks ago, and don't really talk about what we do with the radio shows, because they think I'm a bit nuts.
That's standard.
And, Tina, my partner, tried to tell them about she was really proud of the work that we do, and their hands went up to their ears, and I don't want to hear about that, was the response. And that really made me sad.
Yeah, that would make me sad too. I mean, I'm quite lucky that I have got the backing of the majority of my family. And one of the posts today that someone was talking about me, they were saying how tragic it is, and it must be awful for my family having to deal with me, which my family thinks bloody hilarious. Because the other thing they said is that unless they're all part of it too, because that's how cults start. Which is, I mean, we had Howard laughing at that, but because we get accused of being a cult so many times from different facets, but we were just people that have been through a lot of shit and are open-minded and willing to look into things.
Well, my family couldn't give a shit.
Yeah.
But I'd like to say, Sarah, that I consider myself privileged to have met you face to face and some members of your family, and they're a fantastic bunch.
Yeah, they are. They're pretty good sort. They're pretty good sort. And I say there are the odd members that have sort of got a problem with what I do and what I say, but by the vast majority totally agree with me and totally back me up, even if they do it in a secret way and covertly rather than overtly.
Well, I think the big thing I mention on the show all the time, people don't like the information forced on them because they don't understand it. That's the thing. So they have an equal and opposite reaction when you try and tell them something. So that's why my Facebook's not like anybody else's in this field. It's just a normal Facebook. There's only the odd news article which is in with what is actually happening in the mainstream world, just to prove that it was happening anyway.
Yeah.
That's the only thing is I really post. Because people don't like it forced on them. When I first started the show, I've mentioned it many times, that people just had a real bad reaction. They were like, oh, I don't want to hear it, it's all lies, bad reaction. But the same people who were like that have came back later. Yeah,
and that's what I'm finding. Although I'm getting a few that are attacking me, there's a lot of people privately messaging me, asking me for more information or where they can find out about stuff and what have you. So there's this double level that's going on that's quite interesting. And I do tend to use Facebook as my interaction with the world, if you know what I mean. It's my sort of filter, if you like, with the outside world. I mean, there's people that I know from my work and what have you, but I tend to keep most of what's on there as in this field rather than my personal stuff. There's not very much. I'm the opposite to you. There's not very much personal stuff in there, but there's quite a lot about this sort of thing. So it's quite interesting how everyone uses it in a different way, isn't it?
It depends how you start out though as well. Because when I started out, I mentioned it many times again, I was compelled to read books, so that stopped us from going down the rabbit hole. A lot of the rabbit hole stuff just seemed ludicrous, which it was anyway when I look back later. Yeah.
Where I like to get a lot of my information from is YouTubing conferences, actual people talking at conferences, and that's a lot of scientific ones as well that I really enjoy watching. So because of my dyslexia, reading books for me is really, really hard and takes a lot out of me. So I probably don't read as many books as I should, but I do tend to, those same authors, if I know they're being interviewed or if I know they're doing a presentation on something and what have you, I can pick up a lot more information very quickly. And then I'll probably read, after I've listened to them, then I can read their book and take it in a lot easier.
Well, I did it intensively. For like 2 years, reading books, watching documentaries, watching videos, researching online, looking at the bullshit, looking at the truth, and then coming to a conclusion after. I'm going, hang on a minute, there's some shit to this.
not half. But anyway, going on with the next one, because we've only got 3/4 of an hour left, and it is going to involve me doing some reading again, but this was a personal letter. This is my own writing, and this was to my other father, my natural father, who spent 34 years incarcerated in a mental institution. And again, it's sort of always hits home when I get accused of being mad, because he was under Section 41 and detained under the Mental Health Act for a lot of years. So, and he's the reason, because he ended up in there because someone slipped an LSD tablet in his drink. And so the more I'm sort of doing my research on this and looking into the shamanic side of things, etc., then the more I'm realising that he ended up in there for so long, and it was real nasty stuff that he endured in the time he was in there. And he was in there for so long because of the drugs that he was put on. And that's got me looking into that side of things. And of course, I do the children and young persons counselling, and I do not report up a lot of what I'm told, because they would be put in under the mental health situation. And I know a lot of it is stuff that sort of people come to me with, is stuff that doesn't need to go in that direction, because it's just things that people don't understand, or they're trained not to understand. Even though I know some people who work in mental institutions as mental health nurses, and they actually agree that they're having an experience that is interdimensional, if you like.
Well, there's a lot of people who've had mental problems, who just cry out and say, all I wanted was some counselling. I didn't want any drugs. Exactly. I didn't want any of your shit. All I wanted was counselling. But you can't get it. Yeah.
You can't. Well, and there's lots of people, like most of the people I train with, are either unemployed or doing something different because we can't get work. So there's all these people. There's all these people out there who need counselling and want counselling, and there's all these trained counsellors who are doing other things or not working. Exactly. And it's absolutely bizarre.
Go ahead, Andy.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Sarah, that I went for some counselling a while back for a problem that I had, and I found that just as it started to be effective and started doing a bit good, we've run out of time. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
It's almost as if they were waiting for that point when I start to respond and say, that's it, time out.
Yeah, happens a lot, unfortunately. And also that whole 6 weeks, the whole 6 weeks issue, you get 6 weeks and then that's it. That's all you're allowed. Mm-hmm. And some of these things are so deep-seated. Or the whole specialist thing, oh no, I'm not qualified in that. You have to go and see someone else. And so these poor buggers that have been through so much have got to tell the story all over again to some stranger. Well, and it's just so wrong.
The time issue is the thing with GPs. With doctors, they've only got 15 minutes with you. So
but the main thing is, the SSRIs, these blooming Prozac type drugs and what have you, they do not work. They absolutely do not work, and they're based on, again, absolute fraud. Because they tried to make out that they were needed because serotonin levels were low, and it was a malfunction in the brain that made. But no. When you are depressed, then the serotonin goes low, and artificially making serotonin will stop you making serotonin. It's the same as when you can't make natural oxytocin when you're given syntocin when you're pregnant. It's the same thing.
Well, the work in that they put you on a plateau, they keep you calm.
Yes.
For a lot of people.
Yes, but they don't do anything long term at all. They are totally useless on their own without counselling. Well, without addressing the problem in the first place. They are totally and utterly useless. Because they just stop people feeling. And often they cause the symptoms that they're there to prevent. Mm-hmm. So it's absolutely mad. So I suppose this was the letter that I wrote this man because he wasn't in my life. I've been protected from him because of everything that happened. And he was in my life very, very little. But I have got very fond memories of him. Just the little snippets that I could remember as a child. And I think this was the letter that I wrote to him when he was in a coma. But he did come back from that, but died a few months later. So, again, I might need to get the tissues out for this one because I've not reread it for a long time. So there's a lot of. I wrote it a few years ago. I wrote this on the 5th of January 2008.
Don't worry about it, Sarah. Take your time.
Okay. So a letter to Dave. I am writing you this letter at 3 a.m. on the morning of the 5th of January 2008. I last saw you on the afternoon of New Year's Day. You were in hospital accompanied by 2 carers and you were fighting for every breath. Shortly after we saw you, you were taken to intensive care and put on a ventilator, where you remain unconscious at this time. Before we got the phone call to say you had been admitted to the main hospital, I last saw you on Christmas Eve in the unit that had been your home for many years, where you told me that you were a 21-year-old man trapped inside an old man's body. You went on to tell me that on New Year's Day, or on a day in April, you would get your 21-year-old body back. For me, then it felt like you were telling me you were not going to be around for long. Since Boxing Day, I've been struggling with one of the worst colds I've ever had, at the same time as struggling to understand my relationship with you, my father. I found out that you were my father when I was about 13, and reading Jean, my mother's diaries, from the time when I was born on February the 13th, 1965. References about you were in code, but I knew who you were because my childhood memories came flooding back to me. Memories of going out on your speedboat. Memories of being on the beach next to the lifeboat station and talking to you. Memories of seeing you on the prom with children in your car and knowing there was something strange in the meeting. But then there was always something a little strange whenever you and Jean talked. I suppose that even though, when I asked my grandmother who adopted me who my father was, and she told me she didn't know because Jean had never said, I always felt it was you. It's hard not to know when you see your own eyes. I remember how your eyes used to look at me with a mixture of pride and fascination. Years later, while you were staying locally at a home where you spent some time, I remember how for many weeks you would sit on the front wall every Tuesday morning waiting for me to pass in the car. We would wave at each other and you would have that same look. A long while before this, I can remember seeing you stood by the waffle stand with that same look. Jean, when we got back to the shop, was crying on Pete, her husband, and your oldest best friend's shoulder, telling him that you looked scruffy. I asked who they were talking about, and Pete said, oh, someone we used to know. It was shortly after this I read that you'd been sectioned, or committed as you used to say then. This would have been in the late 70s, and I heard enough to know that the treatment you endured was right out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, with experimental drugs and electric shock therapy. The other day, we saw your disturbed reaction to the alarm on your drip, and I feel we all sense what horror you might have thought it might be. I wonder if someone had been there to hear your story and acknowledge your pain, how different your life could have been. I wish I knew your full story, the way I know the story of some of the children I am counselling. I've discovered just in the past few days since I found out from you that your real mother's name on Christmas Eve, that you were born to a child mother called Joan in Nottingham. Just 16 when she had you and unable to keep you. You underwent some type of adoption to the Woods, an older couple who had obvious mental health issues themselves. I can only imagine what horrors you endured as a child, but I've learnt enough to know that you hurt the people that you love. People who do this have been hurt by the people that were supposed to love them. You have not been able to hurt me because Jean, my lovely mother, I have never called mother, has always done her best to protect me, within the constraints she herself had let me go to keep me. She tried to keep in touch with you during your interments in the various hospital units and homes that you've been your home over the past 30 years. Even getting a job as a nurse at one, in part so she could be with you. By a cruel twist of fate, she had to make the phone call to have you taken back into the secure accommodation when your condition deteriorated, when the doctors started messing with your medication. We have looked for answers as to why you developed paranoid schizophrenia. I have done this by talking to the people who knew you and who still to this day talk of you as some kind of superhero. Jean feels it was your childhood experiences. Ginger Wilson thinks it's because someone dropped an LSD tablet in your drink for a laugh when you were out at the South Sea Islands nightclub. He says you were never right after that. Skip points out that while you saved all those people with your conviction and of invincibility and Olympic swimming ability, you took a hell of a battering attempting to rescue yet another child from the tunnel run, this time failing to save him. For Skip, it was this event that changed you. During the 30 years you've been ill, I have got on with my life and had a husband, a partner and 3 beautiful children. My children, Emma, Hannah and Liam, unfortunately, have never known you as their granddad. They know your story from my story, but they don't know you. They saw you once at the lifeboat station while you were up there watching a display, and the other time at Pete's funeral. Pete, in his time, was my stepfather, my brother-in-law, and my boss. During his funeral, his body was lowered into the ground to the sound of Apache by the shadows. At this point, you leapt up from your minders and grabbed Jean and started jiving with her. After 1 or 2 turns, your trousers fell down and you were dragged off by your minders. We all laughed, but it was too much for Pete's brothers to cope with, and he stropped off to the car in disgust. On reflection, afterwards, Jean told me she had only ever had 2 jibing partners, you and Pete. She explained that you used to dance very stiffly and Pete very fluidly. When you first got hold of her that day, and she thought, he softened up. She told me that it felt like Pete was having his last dance with her through you, his best friend, and cried to me as she realised she would never dance again. In the months that followed, we also lost the mum and dad who had adopted me, and my natural nan and granddad. The grief of the 3 deaths in such a short space of time could hardly bear. It was not long after this that your social worker got in touch with me to say that your health was deteriorating. I so wanted to see you, but I had endured all the grief that I could, and I was scared to build a relationship with you. I'd always been fascinated by you, but couldn't handle the reality of what you had become, as well as being a mother to my own children and building my career. I have always had the need to be needed and somehow knew that you would feed off that and drain me if I would let you. It was only 18 months ago, after a lot of personal therapy, that I felt strong enough to come and see you. Every time I see you, I experience so many feelings. I feel such pity for your situation and sadness for our lack of relationship. I know physically we have so much in common, and I share your strength of character as well as your bad back and dodgy lungs. I know, however, that if you had been part of my life, I would have been damaged by you and wouldn't have achieved all that I have. Because of the love that I have received, I am a very loving person, and you have missed out on this love. I am angry that you did not fight harder to be part of my life. I got my first ever Christmas card from you about 2 years ago. It arrived in January via the social club, but it meant so much to me, and I cannot throw it away. Because of your delusional state, I cannot get the answers that I need from you. I have such a good relationship with my half-brother and sister, Michael and Catherine. I find it hard to accept my lack of relationship with you, with your son, my half-brother Spencer. I found out about him when I was about 20, and I
and I introduced myself. We've always got on since, and we met his family. But it was so hurt by you that it made any relationship to have very difficult. I know Spencer has had his own share of domestic problems, as I have, but it never felt right that our children are growing up not knowing each other. I heard last night that he came to see you. I am pleased about that, as I know he has fought with his emotions for many years, or whether he should or should not. I feel it's a shame that you would not have been awake, as you would have been struck by his eyes. Like mine, they are the same. I struggle as to if they are doing the right thing by keeping you alive on a ventilator. From what you told me on Christmas Eve, I wonder if you were meant to die on New Year's Day. When I left you that day, I wanted to tell you that I loved you. I couldn't. Whether that was because you had your carers with you, or if I'm scared of what your track record when people you love. Maybe it's just because you don't believe in yourself that you are capable of being loved because of what happened to you, and I'm picking up on this. Or it could be that I have lost 2 fathers already, and the pain was so intense, I don't know if I can bear it again. I wonder about the quality of life endured. But then, is it right to judge against mine? What I do know is that I do care deeply, and I'm so, so sad. I hope that you soon get your 21-year-old body back, the age you were when I was born. The pictures I have prove that you were one hell of a specimen. The stories I am told, that you were brave and talented, a character and a hero that never got the recognition he deserved. Who knows what could have happened if you had been dealt a better hand in your early days. And that's left me. All that's left is for me to encourage and admire those qualities in your grandchildren, and later on in your great-grandchildren, and maybe through my work in some small way to enable another strong, beautiful, talented, resourceful child to make sense of what's happened to them, so that they can live lives free from the mental illness and defences that have blighted yours. This letter is your story as I have lived it, my truth, my acknowledgement of all that you are and all that you have been through. It's my thank you to all who have loved you and protected me and cared for you, allowing me to have a fruitful and productive life. It is everything I haven't been able to say to you and wanted to. If it is time to leave your old man's body behind, then it's also my goodbye to you. You are loved. And I ended that with love, Sarah and Michelle. And the postscript on May the 8th, I'll just have a second, hang on.
Take your time, man.
Yeah. So postscript, May the 8th. After fighting his illness bravely, Dave Ivan Wood died of a heart attack on the 22nd of April, as he predicted. In the period between January and April, he became reunited with his son Spencer and his wife and children. He also met with his grandson for only the second time. His funeral was on the 7th of May, was held with his children, who had hardly met, stood side by side. So to their mothers, once rivals, now standing together in the mixed emotions only they would know. The scattering of his ashes and celebration of the times with the RNLI was held on Sunday the 18th of May 2008 at 1 p.m. at the lifeboat station. And that's the end of that. So sorry for getting emotional.
All right, man, Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people do know when they're going to die. My granddad, on my father's side, he died the same day that my grandmother died, but years apart.
Absolutely, and you hear this so often, and so many people die on the birthday as well, don't they?
Mm-hmm. It was no coincidence.
Absolutely not. But something else that was a bit of a coincidence, on the day of his funeral, rather than the day at the lifeboat station, what they'd done was, and thank you guys for bearing with me through that. I really appreciate it. Because it can be a bit embarrassing listening to somebody sobbing their way through something, can't it? But it just seemed important to do it. But something that happened, which I will never ever forget, on the day of his funeral. Now, if you can think that leading up to his funeral, we had to hold some of the service in the Francis Willis units in Lincoln, and a chaplain there suggested that he had some stones, and so that people could go up and pick a stone and go up and put it in a pot and say what David meant to them.
All right. Yeah.
And I said, well, how about I get some shells? And so I went on the beach this particular day. I could hardly find any bloody shells because I thought it would be nice to get some shells.
It's funny, you never find them on our beach either.
No,
you find a lot of rusty metal.
No, but usually there's loads of shells. But on this particular day, there was not one bloody shell anywhere. But I did manage to scrape a few, together, but a lot of them were razor shells, which when I, of course, took the razor shells in, they were taken off me because the other inmates could use them as a weapon. So these razor shells were actually taken out of the tub, if you like, and we managed to just get together these few skanky little shells for people to do this little ceremony, if you like. And so we did this, and then we went on to the creme and had another thing at the creme and what have you. And then in the night time, my partner was refereeing. So on the way home, I stopped and watched him referee this game in Louth. And then we went back into Mablethorpe, and we went back to the pub with everybody. And I just sort of had a moment where I lost it. And I said, I've been frantically looking for these whelk shells because I knew, because again, with a link with Pete, because he used to sell shellfish. So I wanted these whelk shells.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a whelk. I found this piddly little whelk shell that I used, and I put this little half-eaten whelk shell in this thing. And I just had a bit of a meltdown moment. I says, "Look, I'm going up on the beach. I'll be all right. I'll be back in sort of 10, 15 minutes. I just want to have a moment to myself." And I went up on the beach, and they were thousands and thousands. They went up the lifeboat station steps, and there were thousands and thousands and thousands of whelk shells. Just the whole beach. It had been a high tide, and the whole beach was just littered with all these whelk shells. And I absolutely couldn't believe my eyes. It had gone in a few days, those few sort of 3 days, from no shells at all to just these thousands of whelk shells, just the whole beach littered with them. I thought, no one's going to believe me, so I actually went and got back and got my partner and took him up, and he was moaning like hell because it was windy and blowing and what have you. And I went back and I was like, "You've got to see this, you've got to see this." And I went and got a bag out of the car, and I just collected got a load and brought them back, and I've still got those shells now. But that was just an amazing. Again, there's no such thing as coincidences, but it just seemed like a little message, if you like.
Yeah, it's like people who die on the same day. When the wife dies, they'll die on the same day.
Yeah,
they've been married for 60. So there's no coincidence in
Absolutely
that.
No coincidence. But
dying of a broken heart is real.
Yeah, and that's happened to my partner's grandparents. That's what happened with them. They died within a very, very short space of time. And again, because it's interesting how history sort of repeats itself. And my own partner, he was a victim of abuse, or survivor of abuse, if you want to call it that. And he found out that the man that was abusing him in the boys' brigade, he found out that he was dying of cancer, and he couldn't cope with everybody going, "Oh, what a shame, what an amazing man," and is that. So he'd made up his mind to tell somebody or report it before this man died, because he couldn't bear this man dying with everyone thinking he was some sort of wonderful person. And then when he made the decision to tell somebody, then within a few days both of his grandparents died within a few days of each other. And because this man had told him that if he told anybody God would punish him, he thought that it would be God punishing him for saying anything. So it made him shut up and not disclose for a further 20 odd years. So words are very powerful, aren't they?
Wow, yeah. What do you think happens when we die? I'm a fan of the idea of reincarnation.
Yeah, I think we get recycled, but I think we've probably got some work to do before we do. I don't think, from what I understand and what I've heard and what I've read, and I don't think it's like you go straight out of one body into another. I think there's a period. From what I understand, the whole Earth thing and the life thing is a bit like a practical lesson where you get to experience, and then you go and you do the theory. Well, that's a bit as I understand it, but I might be wrong.
There's some people who say that you have a choice of what you come back as.
Yeah, well, but if you've got some lessons to learn, I suppose it's a bit like when you're at school and you know what you want to be in life, and so there's certain topics that you can choose to do, and there's certain you can go on work experience at the place where you think you're going to learn the most, and I know after, again, we're coming up to the anniversaries, so I tend to get very emotional this time of year because we're coming up to the anniversary of not only the time, right now is when my first granddaughter was due, and she had a stillbirth at 25 weeks, so she was actually stillborn in August, but she would have been due right now, actually. And my second granddaughter, she was stillborn on the 28th of November. So, but very much it felt like she was being sent, if you like, she'd done her bit, you know, she was being sent as just to test out what was happening, or as a test, or whatever you want to call it, for a very special soul to follow. And then the year and a month to the day later, my third granddaughter was born alive and well, and don't we bloody know it. She's an amazing little spirit. Everyone says she's spirited, you know, she's spirited. That's the sort of, because she's a little bugger. But Andy's met her, and she's, I don't know, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. She's just got so much amazing energy. I don't know what you think, Andy, to that, but...
Yes, the first free-range child that I met.
Yeah, she's definitely free range.
Yeah, she's absolutely fabulous, into everything and encouraged to explore, which she's so missing from so many children's lives these days. Don't touch that, don't go there, don't look at that, don't do this. She's into everything, and it's amazing to see.
Yeah, but maybe those conditions wouldn't have been right for her little soul to do whatever she needs to do if we all hadn't had that experience the year before. So that's my feelings on what happened to our family in particular, and how I suppose we've all got to rationalise things that happen to us in our lives, haven't we? Mm-hmm. Which is part of what I've done tonight. It's this work. I do think we've all got to remember, you know, everybody, when you look at everyone's important work, it is all about finding out about themselves. I mean, Bowlby, when you look at Bowlby's work, he spent his whole life trying to unravel what happened to him as a very small child. And what happened to him as a very small child was that he was brought up by his nanny for the first 4 years. And when his nanny left the employ, he lost his mother. Because effectively his mother, his attachment figure, was his nanny rather than his mother. And he spent his whole life work trying to unravel that. And I suppose what we're all doing in this sort of work is trying to unravel our own stuff, which is why I thought it just felt important to do this tonight. And it's a bit self-indulgent, but it's a lot self-indulgent. But some of my most important work to help other people has been when I've done something like this, and they've got a lot from it, and it's helped them sort their own life out. And so I think when we do this from the heart stuff like we have, and I say it's a bit battering, and I'm sorry that I do get emotional and I do cry through it, but it is, I think it's important work to do, that we do a bit of bearing ourselves, and we let people know why we are doing what we're doing and what we're doing it for.
You know, I've got a friend who was brought up by his grandmother, but who he thought was his sister was actually his mother.
Same situation, yeah.
What he thought was his nephew was actually his brother.
Yeah.
And when we saw them together at a wedding, we were like, hang on a minute, there's never a nephew in it. Him, they never looked that alike. You know, uncle and a nephew never looked that alike. Is that his brother? People were saying at the wedding, is that your brother? And he's like, it's not my brother. I think he kind of knew, though. He kind of knew inside. But it came out later on when he was talking to what he thought was his sister. He said, you're my mother, aren't you? And she said, yeah. And then he went off the rails for a bit, but he got his head together and he was sorted out. He bought a motorbike and broke his jaw.
Did he?
He was in a bike accident. He went totally off the rails.
Well, I was always told about my mum, if you like. It was weird. It was the weirdest thing, because I was always told the absolute truth about my mum, but I was not told the truth about my father. But then my brother was. I was told because my mum then went on to have an affair with an ambulance driver, and then my half brother was born. But I wasn't told the truth about him. I was told that she started working in the maternity ward and someone had abandoned him, and so she felt sorry for him and brought him home. So he was told the truth about himself, but I wasn't told the truth about him. And then my sister, Kate, who you all know, she was never told the truth. She was never told the truth about either of us. And it was only when she was in a French class, she got into trouble because in French, and I don't know how to do it, but they had to say who was in there, who they had. You know, my name's Kate, and I've got one brother, she said. And so the French teacher went, "Don't lie to me. You know, you got you." She did it in French. You know, I've got a brother and a sister. And Kate goes, "No, I haven't." And then another girl in the class goes, "Yes, you have. My mum was at school with your mum, and she knows you've got a sister," and things like that. And so she found out at school when she was about 12 about me.
Oh wow!
Which is mental, isn't it? It's absolutely mental. But it's like the whole family secrets thing.
You've got to be told it at least, because he had such resentment. His grandmother.
Yeah. No, I think it's important if something like that's happened, and I always advocate it with anybody, parents and children that I'm involved with. Tell them from the beginning, because if you told from the beginning, you just accept it.
Well, it wouldn't have been that much of it. It wouldn't have been a big deal. I think they get scared. See, I think a lot of in that situation, like who he thought was his mother, and it was really his grandmother. She's scared that he's not going to be calling her mother anymore because she has been his mother, you know. But that would have never happened. No.
I mean, I don't call Jean mum I don't call her mum, but if I'm talking about her now, I'll call her mum. But I've only done that since my grandma mum has died, because she was Nan, you know. But I used to call her mum, but if I was referring to her, I'd call her Nan, because everyone knew her as Nan because of my siblings and what have you. But I used to call her mum to her face, but I'd call her Nan to everybody else. Whereas if with my mum, I call her Jean, but if I'm talking about her, I call her mum. So it's bonkers, isn't it?
Well, it's my cousin as well. She was brought up by her Nan, but she called her mother, and she always did, and she called her real mother as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sarah, just on the subject of reincarnation there, we've got a fascinating series of posts from Chris in the chat room.
Oh, yeah.
He said, when my daughter was born, all the midwives were saying she's been here before.
Yeah.
And then Sean said, the midwife said that. He said, yeah, I can't remember why now, though you could just tell.
Yeah.
And Sean said, well, they see birth, there was something special for sure. And Chris said it was weird, just her facial expressions and things like that, as if she couldn't have known them unless she'd been here before.
Yeah, and you do see it in babies. There's so many babies, they're just so knowing, look so knowing, and you can. And I mean, it's strange because I've got sort of very different relationships with each of my children, which has very much been because of the different births that I had with them, I think, because that's got a lot to do with it. But also, you can't help think there's some soul stuff going on as well. And I look at Dolores Cannon's work a lot, God bless her. I know she died about a year ago, didn't she?
Yeah.
But Dolores Cannon talks about the 3 waves of volunteers. Now, I think my son is very much one of those sort of waves, second wave of volunteers who came in to absolutely raise the vibration of the planet. And the stuff that the work that he's getting involved with and everything, I really do think that is that's what he's here for. He's here to raise the vibration of the planet. That's his only job. Sorry, go on.
Is that the guy who jumps out of airplanes?
Yes, that's the one that jumps out of a perfectly good aeroplane. Apparently, though, it wasn't a perfectly good aeroplane. It was a bit dodgy, but...
So madness does run in the family then?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, it does. And, I'll tell you the funny story about that, actually. But I know... but the shared sort of humour with my middle child, we've definitely, Hannah, Ira's mum, we've definitely been here together before on whatever level, and we absolutely get each other. And I think I've been here before with my older daughter, but we love each other dearly. But there's what would you describe it as? There's a tension there. So I think we've been here together here before in a different level, where there's been a bit of tension, and because that plays out in so many ways, it's fascinating. But yeah, just remind me what I was talking about with Liam.
Jumping out of planes.
jumping out of the planes. Yeah, no, there was something. Oh, what was it?
You said you had a funny story about it.
I did. Yeah, I did. I had a funny
What did you
story,
say,
yeah.
Andy? You were saying it was a dodgy one or something, a dodgy plane.
This
happens on all podcasts, by the way. What the hell were we talking about?
Yeah, no, yeah.
You said I have a funny story about that, actually.
Yeah, no, I should have made a note for myself because obviously it's one of those that's come and gone. But it was nearly there again then, but went again, I'm sure. But I'll just shout out before the end of the show if it actually comes to me again.
Something I picked up in something you said a few minutes ago, Sarah. You mentioned your sister Kate. Now, when we popped over to see you recently, I'm sure you said to me, "I want to get Kate on the show."
Yeah, she's. I think she's going to come on next month.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah, I think she's going to come on and talk about the sort of stuff that she's become involved with the Mizan therapy and everything. Again, it's all a bit girly stuff, but it's important stuff for people to know about because there's so many women having hysterectomies and things that don't need them if they know about this technique. So there's a lot of medical intervention that can be prevented, and a lot of pain and back trouble and what have you that can be prevented if they know about this technique. So, yeah, absolutely, really, really important.
Well, somebody in the chat room saying, is this available to listen back to? So must have joined us late. So you've made an impact in the last minutes. Anyway.
Oh no! Well, yeah. As I say, I do get a bit embarrassed when I do sort of really personal stuff because I do cry. And you know, anyone that's seen me blooming, there's always a moment when I'm presenting, when I'm doing a conference and what have you, that I'll get emotional and part of that's nerves when I'm doing a conference and stuff. And part of it is that I always work with really personal stuff. I always do, and but that is my congruence, if you like, and it's not because I haven't dealt with it, because I've dealt with this stuff to death, but it always puts me back in a place of real pain, and I feel that pain, but I feel other people's pain as well, and so often it doesn't just bring up my own stuff, but it brings up like other folks' pain when on a one-to-one level as well. So
what I was going to ask you, Sarah, is does your Paul listen to this?
No, he wouldn't listen. No.
Oh wow.
I was just going to say, I think Sarah needs an extra big hug when she gets home tonight.
No, he won't. He'll be watching the Grand Prix or some sort of football thing or what have you. He won't be watching this. He'll be watching sport or what have you. But I have found a mutual interest.
What's that?
Have either of you ever watched Fringe?
No, but I know a lot of people who do.
Right, yeah. Well, one of my customers has lent me the box set because obviously a lot of stuff that I talk about, she goes, "Oh, that's been on Fringe. And so I thought, oh, let's have a look at this Fringe. Well, luckily he likes things like The Blacklist and stuff like that. So, and I think it's something that's been done by the same people. And when I've caught a bit of Blacklist, I've forgotten, we look at that, we've been looking at that. And so this weekend we've watched the whole first series of Fringe back to back. We've done about 13 hours or something of watching Fringe.
There's a few programs at the minute putting things in like Bohemian Grove and stuff that they're putting it into, whether the people who create them, they're into the stuff or know about it, so they're putting it into the programs.
Yeah, well, again, it's that whole thing of if they tell you what you're doing, they absolve themselves from the karma, isn't it? So they're going to tell you what they're doing somehow. But I do think it's been quite good for us to watch together because I can bring a dimension to it, and he likes that sort of thing anyway. So there's not very often there's anything to actually watch that we can both agree on. But
I'm pleased it's not EastEnders or Coronation Street.
Oh bloody hell, no! I'll get my earphones on when he has that on. My earphones and something on YouTube. People don't realise this is why, because I've got no interest in mainstream television at all,
Jesus,
and so
yeah.
while he's watching all this absolute shite, this is why I'm just researching. So it appears like I'm sat next to him.
Well,
but I'm off on another little planet. So
we're at the end of the show. So do you want to give out an email before you go?
Well, if people want to look at the Swinging at the Gates on the Gates of Hades, it's One Ball Media and it's Matthew Deleuze. And if I can ever retrieve all my stuff from my computer, if anyone ever wants a copy of that letter to Dave, because I know it has been used in some sort of teaching in the mental health services and what have you, as just what the effects the mental illness has on the family. Mm-hmm. So if anyone wants a copy of that, just keep harassing me and I'll get it to you eventually. Even if I've got to just photocopy it and send it, I'll do that. And the best way to get hold of me is on Facebook, because Sarah-Goodley. There's only three of us now. It's quite obvious which one I am.
A couple of imposters.
Sarah, there's just been a comment posted in the chat room, which I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear. Sue Simpson has said, watching Sarah's various presentations on YouTube has been inspirational to me in my journey in higher education. She's been a real role model.
Oh, thank you very much. I always think I'm just so unprofessional because I do get so emotional, but that's what makes me me.
Sarah, I think you did really well to hold it together.
I didn't.
I did either, so you might be.
Yeah.
Doesn't bother me at all. Anytime, Sarah. Thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome. We'll try and get my sister on next time. So
terrific. Please check out the Facebook page, Enemy Within Radio, all one word. It's at Enemy Within Talk on Twitter. And it's www.enemywithinradio.com.
I've remembered the funny story, by the way.
Go on. Go on.
All right, very quickly. When I first met my partner and I was heavily pregnant with our son Liam, he was playing snooker with a guy who used to know my real father. And Paul says, oh, God, if we do another shot like that, I'll hang myself, because he kept missing. And so this guy says, oh, can you remember Woody? He tried to hang himself, and he broke the rope snapped and he broke his ankle. And so I said, yeah, I should do, shouldn't I? He's my real father, isn't he? And he says, oh, God, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, terrible what happened to him. Terrible what happened. I says, yeah, awful, wasn't it? So he says, same thing happened to his father, he says. He says, hereditary brain disease. At that point, my partner, Paul, he spat his lager out all over the pool table because I was 8 months pregnant. Yeah, so sorry, that was the story.
Thank you very much. Who we got on Tuesday, Andy?
We've got Dr. Barry Trower, microwave weapons expert and debriefer of Cold War spies.
And that's on peoplesinternetradio.com. See you on Tuesday, folks.
Join you Tuesday. See you later. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sarah. Bye, everyone.